Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 88 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at PSCU. As the nation's premier payments CUSO, PSCU proudly supports the success of more than 1,500 credit unions. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Brian Schools. Brian is the president and CEO of Chartway Federal Credit Union. Brian is somebody I've been looking forward to having on the show for a while now. I remember talking to him about it at GAC. Since that point in time, we've gotten to know each other better over the past few months. I knew this would be a great conversation and we would have a blast. We talked about Chartway's foundation and how it's really one with the credit union and the importance of giving back to the communities they serve. We talked a lot about culture and building that team that represents the credit union's values and missions and the work that had to be done over the years to get to the point where they've been able to execute over the past few months. Brian was amazing to share all the leadership lessons he's, and those life hacks that he's learned along the way, and even a few of the setbacks and, where he grew from those. As always, we have some fun with the rapid fire questions to wrap up the show. Like I said earlier, I knew this conversation was going to be a lot of fun. I enjoyed getting the chance to sit down virtually, of course, with Brian and have a longer conversation about credit unions, leadership lessons learned in life. I think you are really going to enjoy this one too. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with Brian Schools. Enjoy. Brian, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Randy.
I've been looking forward to this. Interesting times we've been going through, and over the past few months, I've actually gotten to know you better. So, and everything that you guys have going on at Chartway, there's a couple things that I really wanted to touch on today because I thought the listeners would really enjoy hearing about it. One was the foundation that you have and the work you're doing in the community, and then also just the culture that you've been building at the credit union. And I know that's something we talk about a lot and all know it's a lot of work. So to start with the foundation, why is that so important?
I'll tell you about it. So it's actually called the We Promise Foundation. And I want to say it was formed in either 05 or 06. And it's sort of, if you work at Chartway, you're kind of part of We Promise as well. It's that sort of in our blood. To date, we've raised a little, almost $12 million.
Wow.
The funds raised are from our team, from our board, from our partners, from our members, the community. And it's really all for children that have some form of debilitating or major health issue. So almost think of us as a funds raiser, and then we help source the Make-A-Wishes, Make-A-Wish Virginia, Make-A-Wish Utah, local children's hospitals that really they have a better process with the children. And we have a very symbiotic relationship between all of us. It's like I said, it sort of starts touching our culture. Back to your second question, we get there. If you are at Chartway, you're sort of at We Promise as well. That's the primary, part of our community commitment.
Yeah.
On culture itself, so I'd say probably 5 years ago, we started really working on our culture a little bit different. About the time I became CEO, maybe we were wandering just a little bit more than we needed to. I think Chartway's always had a very open culture, but we wanted to come in a little stronger. I think it takes time.
Yeah.
And so everything that's going on now in COVID, it's actually made our culture even stronger, but I don't believe we would be as nimble and probably as advanced as we are now if we hadn't started our work 5 years ago. So there was like a foundation coming in a little bit.
That's the direction that I did want to go. Just from other conversations with you and others, that realization of how much the work you were putting in beforehand. Chuck Purvis was just on the show. He was talking about the work, for the past 5-10 years that they've been doing that. All of a sudden you're like, whoa, this good thing we were doing that then, right?
No, and I'm not trying to take away at all the innovation and all the cool stuff that's gone on this year, but there's like this underlying foundation for that kind of helped be the catalyst that is all the work we've done over the last 4 or 5 years. New people on the team, people that have been here for a very, very long time, a little bit more with some open-minded mindsets and just maybe the way we work with each other. The fact that we know within our culture, it's really about three things. It's about our members, it's about our communities, and it's about each other.
Yeah.
And we have that kind of locked in stone. It's kind of been the formation of trust underneath everything.
I know Jill's been working with you guys too, and it's been something that she's talked a lot about is, not only the willingness to build, but something, and I guess I would throw this out there to you. It's something I've heard her say many times is, the work is done by everybody in the organization, but you have to have that, the CEO needs to be behind it, right? Or else it doesn't flow all the way down. For people who maybe, if you're talking to some other CEOs out there who maybe didn't get this start 5 years ago to start laying that foundation, it's that best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago or today, right? It's if they're looking at making this, maybe looking at their culture more during this experience and they haven't had as good of an experience as say Chartway has, any advice to just get going on that?
Just realize you're not going to have all the answers yourself.
Yeah.
And you've got to engage everybody, have listening, have humility. And one of the things we try to do, and I think I've always felt this way, but I've learned to be, I think, much better at it through this, is lead with principles first and then kind of get out of people's way. I can remember, I want to say, so the last time I saw you, we were at GAC, and it was about a week and a half later. I remember we have these town halls, are called roundtables at Chartway. We're in front of some people physically, and then we're in different locations across the country. So a lot of people are already on Zoom. I remember telling folks, we're going to do two things throughout all this. We're going to take care of each other. It's going to be about people first. And then we're going to have financial soundness. Obviously, we want the members to feel very comfortable and trusted in working with us. So everything's been about people first and financial soundness from like a responsibility standpoint. Yeah. And it's been interesting to see people run with that in terms of maybe actions that need to take place. The other thing I asked, and maybe this might help with a little bit of culture thought as well, is want to kind of set a tone. And Jill has joked with me a little bit about it. Honestly, you mentioned her because she'd never seen it before. And I don't know, maybe it was odd, maybe not, but it works for us. I ask people to do two things: be well and be kind.
Yeah.
And if there's ever, I don't know about you, Randy, but if there's ever been a time in life, I think people, whether it's at work or outside of work, people get anxious, people get jacked up. Yep. And sometimes if it's just you're at the store buying something, maybe that extra bit of patience with the person checking you out at the grocery store or whatever, there's just a chance to be a little kinder.
I absolutely love that. I think I think we all need that right now. So Joel and I've talked a lot about recently, just there's that like internal frustration with everything going on, right? So just to be kind, to be well and be kind. I absolutely love that.
So I have a daughter who she literally just left about an hour ago for her supposed senior year of college.
Oh boy.
She's been home with us for 6 months. And there's been 2 or 3 times when we get a little anxious inside the house, she has to remind me to be kind.
To be kind.
It comes around, trust me.
I think each one of us probably needs that often going through all of this. Do you think the changes to day-to-day operations that we've seen over the past few months and the way that members are interacting with the credit union, I mean, will that be something that you think is going to continue going forward even after we get through all of this, or?
I do. I think we need to figure out by how much. So from a member's perspective, obviously people were forced, for those that were maybe not already as comfortable to operate digitally, they picked new habits up. What we're trying to look at as a leadership team and understand is as society changes, what portion of folks will revert back to their prior behaviors maybe, and what are going to be like, you know what? I never did banking on the phone before, but it actually works out pretty well. Let's kind of stick with that. And then I think the same thing goes on inside. So we have 30 branches, and we slowed our branches down by appointment only as such. And we've gradually opened them. Open's probably not the right thing because we never technically closed, but we've given more access. So they're back. But inside our corporate building, we probably typically have 350 people, and on any given day, we might have 25 or 30.
Yeah, right.
Odd things. I sort of go back and forth. I would foresee some form of a hybrid model, post-vaccine and that sort of thing, where, maybe once conditions allow it, do we use half our space at our building? And, there are some folks that are permanent in buildings, some remote, and then a lot of mixture. I do worry. I think we have seen productivity and I think we've seen innovation climb. It really wasn't a question of trust for us in terms like you hear in the industry and such. The whole culture that we started 5 years ago was all built on trust. So it wasn't necessarily that, but it was like from a practical standpoint, can it work?
Yeah. Yep.
And it has worked. The one challenge I see is that I think within teams, there's a great deal of collaboration, but across teams, you miss the hallway talk and a little bit of that. And so we're trying to figure out how do you get that balance in the long term.
I think that's the biggest struggle. We've been remote for quite some time at CUInsight. You tend to kind of get in lanes, right, on who you work with and who you talk to and how do you get that cross side. Even if it's up until the COVID, we tried at least 4 to 6 times a year to make sure that everybody got together in one place, just to have that, we still needed it. So yeah, that's something I think a lot of people are going to, across, not outside of credit unions even, they're going to have to figure that out.
In a remote capacity, we do, personal things like happy hours and such, but they're typically within the confines of the team you're on. The one thing that I know that goes completely across everything is once a month it's like I talked about back in the March world when I mentioned that, we're going to take care of people. We have roundtables, which are sort of our town halls, and we get everybody on Zooms. Actually, we have more people than we have, I guess, licenses to be in. We have to do multiple versions of it. But that's really the only time that everybody's connected in. And that's the one thing that I want us to kind of figure out how we can crack.
Absolutely. This is a question I've asked, since the beginning of the podcast. Is there something that you think credit unions overall need to do differently with all the, change that and the disruption and everything that we've heard about for the last few years that's going on in financial services?
Do differently?
Yeah. Do better, maybe.
To a degree, we've already started.
Yeah.
I think it was the courage to be different. There were some courageous decisions we had to make early this year. Okay, let's roll. We're out of that. We're out of the building. Let's go do this. I think realizing that the investments in digital, we moved to a whole different online provider in 2018. And I think if we had not done that, I do not think we would have performed as well as we have this year.
Yeah.
But even with that, I know we need to do more. So it's going to be the courage to invest more in a world, back to your point on, we don't necessarily know how the consumers are going to work in the future. Do you have enough of a branch franchise to support folks that want to see you, but there's much more of a viable digital presence?
Yeah, those are those big questions, right? That are going to have to be figured out. More of a personal question. How have you grown as a leader through this past few months? Anything that you...
So I think I've backed off a little bit. And I am by nature, I'm a high energy person. I'm involved. Depending on who you talked around the company, you might have a few people say, get him out of the way. Or things like that. But since we are so splintered in terms of where we reside right now working, I really believed early on, I knew we were going to have to operate off principles as opposed to actions. Let's make sure we know what we're trying to accomplish and why before a bunch of stuff gets going, because it could be a little bit of time before you even know something's going if you weren't in that particular Zoom or conversation. So I think I've learned to operate more off principles. And I've actually seen people flourish in that way. And I think I've actually become a better leader by doing it. And it's really, the responsibilities of people and financial soundness and the tone of be well, be kind kind of set a path. I don't think we would have been able to do that 4 or 5 years ago. And partially that would have been because of me. I don't think I would have been ready for it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But it's helped a lot.
That's awesome. Last question in this section. If we were to sit down a year from now, I know all of our crystal balls are a bit foggy today, but what are you most proud of that you and your team at Chartway have accomplished over the next 12 months?
I don't want to count the chickens before they hatch, but I would come back and say we took care of people. Yeah. And I say people in the broadest sense. Not only I think we served our members in very innovative ways, but every person at Chartway, even times during very low volumes, we redeployed to find more purpose. We did not furlough anyone. We have not laid anyone off. And we didn't really want just people collecting checks by doing nothing, because I think from a sanity standpoint, probably not what people need in this day and age. So
Absolutely.
we gave everybody a purpose. That coupled with the innovation of over a 2-week period, figuring out how to get 400 people at home. I'm really, really proud of that.
That is good stuff. The second part of the show, the leadership section, have a little fun here. What inspired you? You mentioned 5 years ago, to become the president and CEO of Chartway Federal Credit Union.
Well, so even let's see. This fall, I will have been at Chartway 12 years.
Okay.
So I came to Chartway 12 years ago. I grew up in the banking world. I'm one of those folks that doesn't have 30 years of credit union experience. And, sometimes people think that's neat. Sometimes people frown on us. I grew up in the banking world, and I've always been a numbers, high energy action person, but I did feel a little sense of maybe not being invested in the community enough. So that actually was one of the reasons when the choices I had, I was at a Fortune 100 company, had a choice of going to another Fortune 100 company or coming to a credit union. I chose credit union. At the same time, 5 years ago with making the move, my predecessor retired, and I was one of a few people considered. I actually just felt like I could make a difference here. I felt like I was enough of a business-minded person, but also enough of a person that kind of knew where some of our cracks were and some things that we could do to be better at. Like I said, I think Chartway was wandering a little bit in terms of personality. I really wanted to give us a place. I think we were probably not as involved in the industry as much at that point as we could have been. And we've done a whole lot more. I don't know. It just felt right.
Yeah. How has the inspiration changed since you became the CEO, or has it changed at all?
A little bit. I enjoy seeing success through others more, I think, than I did. I mean, I'm your typical type A person. I grew up out of college and everything. You got to conquer the world and let's go get them and do this and do that. And you got to win and all that. You can't win unless you have a team around you that is ready for that same win as well. I'd enjoy seeing whether it's a next generation person coming up. I'm realizing now that I am 52 years old. I'm 35 in my mind.
Yep, I understand that.
So, but I mean, just kind of seeing the ideas and the energy coming from others and seeing their wins. I enjoy it much more probably than I did early on.
As you mentioned, like bringing others along, and you've kind of talked about that a couple of times already through here. One of the questions that I added through all this that I find interesting is, and I know we've all had to do it as leaders over the past few months, is kind of make that difficult decision. Like the buck does stop with you in the end, and sometimes those decisions might be unpopular. They're made a lot easier when you can bring folks along with you along the way. Is that something you've always had the ability to do, or is it something that you've had to cultivate over the, kind of the years of growth in your career?
I think I've always had the ability to make the decision, but I think I've learned to make it better, if you will.
Okay.
So starting off with a little bit on why the decision's being made, even pre-pandemic, getting into it a little bit, but now during pandemic, there's no doubt, because you don't want to be like you're just hauled up in a office in your house, just making willy-nilly decisions, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So let folks know why and be very collaborative. Our whole culture is listening, trust, collaboration. There are very few decisions that I have made that probably aren't already pretty vetted and lined up with a group of people anyway. I mean, in fact, this is what I had not mentioned earlier, but I'll toss in here. I don't use the term employees at work. I call them team members, and that's, we'll talk about a lot more. And so whether it's my team that reports directly to me or the broader 520 people on the team, we're all in it together. For a common good. And so I just feel a responsibility when I need to make a decision. I need to tell them why we made that call. And I think that's just something I've sort of learned to be accustomed to a little bit more over time.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Is there a common myth about being a good leader that you would like to debunk?
Common myth about being a good leader. I think that, I guess, two things. One, that you know it all because you don't. And two, that you have to be a certain personality. I am far more open and authentic and probably real I will admit a mistake quicker than I can anything else, maybe than some. If you go back maybe to our parents' generations, it's not exactly the way it was.
Absolutely.
I just think people need to realize that whether you're a teller or whether you're a CEO, you're going to get some right and you're going to get some wrong, and you just kind of deal with it when you go.
Yeah, that's a great point to make. When you think back to earlier in your career, was there a mistake that you made, or, you mentioned people coming up through the organization? Is there a mistake that you see young leaders make over and over?
I guess in my case, I think I tried probably to do a little bit too much myself early on.
Yep.
And sometimes, not super often, but I have seen the same with some others maybe trying to prove themselves a little bit. And you kind of got to say, listen, you're actually going to prove yourself just as much by bringing in an expert on some other topic to help your overall idea even flourish that much more. So I think it's just realizing that you're not by yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you mentioned being a type A personality. I think for a lot of us, that was a struggle. You start moving up because you put your head down, you do your thing, and you do it well. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I have to have people with me doing this also.
Right. I had somebody tell me one time, wouldn't these jobs be so much easier if you didn't have to deal with people?
Right.
No, that's what makes it fun.
Absolutely. Has there been a piece of advice or a life lesson that you received early on that you find yourself going back to often?
It's funny. This actually came up last week in a conversation with some folks. One of the very first things I can remember was, my dad was the executive and all this kind of stuff. And he told me, he said, Brian, you never work for someone and no one ever works for you. You work with. I mean, I can remember being like 14 years old and, knowing he had this job and those kind of folks, never actually talked about being a boss, never talked about who worked for him or any of this kind of stuff. It's just you're all on the same team. And it kind of goes back to the team member comment a little bit.
That idea of everybody's your colleague, they're not. Yeah.
Of course. I like that. I mean, and kind of related to that, something that wasn't necessarily from him that I just sort of picked up over time was, I think there's I people and I think there's we people. And I would much rather be around we people is a big part of it. And then I guess I'll add one other piece of life lesson. I am a big relationship person now, but I am a person about planning and making sure we know what's in front of us and let's kind of do it right. So I had a person tell me one time, I guess this was probably 15 years ago, you're a really good alphabet planner. And I'm like, what in the heck is that?
I've not heard that term.
My team now, they said, most people might, if they're planning on doing something, think about the alphabet, they might know what B or C is going to be. You're sort of a K, J, L. I'm probably getting all the letters mixed up. Now you're farther down and just thinking about it through. And it's not that I have some gift on that at all, but I think I've always taken it as my responsibility to kind of know what may be coming down the road. So that's actually something I've shared with my team a lot is let's not answer for today. Let's answer for today and what we think could be tomorrow and the day after tomorrow as well.
Absolutely. I get where you're coming from there. I spend so much time looking at what I believe is going to be next or whatever. It's just that's where my mind ends up going a lot of the time. I need to bring it back to the present sometimes. One of the things that I noticed in the first season where a lot of people talked about mentors. Did you have mentors like coming up through your career? It sounds like you already talked about your dad giving you some good life lessons, and how have they impacted, where you are today?
So, yeah, I kind of had one early in my career and I actually have one now. So early in my career, I was, always think of it as like being Ferris Bueller a little bit. So I don't know. I lived this life. I was probably 25 years old and I was the chief of staff for executive vice president. At that time, his name was Tom, who was running about a $6 or $7 billion consumer organization at a large regional bank at that time, which in today's dollars is probably $13-14 billion. And it was the first chance I had to sort of see behind the scenes to see that they're all humans too.
Absolutely.
So this is very hierarchical, old bank kind of stuff. And, they get some right, they get some wrong, and they're real people. And that gave me, I think, an early lift coming out of college and grad school to know that, there's all this academic stuff, but there's a lot of people involved as well. And there's stuff behind the curtains. The other thing is, I actually, when I was named CEO, I asked our board and they graciously agreed to let me have an executive coach, and I got to select it. It's a dear friend of mine named Scott Evelyn, who I met probably 20 years ago.
Okay. Yeah.
In a project at another company, and just sort of always liked his line of thinking. I trust him like a older brother. He probably doesn't older brother. I'll just say brother. He can give it to me straight. He can reassure me when I need something. So twice a year, he talks with a couple of members of our board. He talks with some of my team to kind of get, a little 360 feedback there. I have talked to him, as you might expect, during the pandemic, a great deal.
Yeah.
And it just helps me to sort of see things from another angle. He also has been part of many of the competencies that we brought into Chartway. He's worked with a great deal of our leadership team.
That's pretty cool.
That's kind of helped me a whole lot. Still does.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the idea of that, is that, having that kind of outside coach, right? I mean,
Yep.
I don't want to say lonely at the top, but you need somebody who's going to speak to you straight, right?
You got to be ready to know that you might not always hear what you want to hear.
Absolutely.
Be ready for that.
That's good stuff. Before just kind of moving on to the last part of the show, if you have a free day, there's nothing on the calendar, what passions do you have outside of credit unions? What do you do to recharge? We all have to do that once in a while as well.
Like I said, I've got my daughter. She's 21, and my daughter Peyton, my wife Kim. We have a golden retriever and a cocker spaniel. Let's see, I like to work out. That kind of got changed with the gym situation. So we're one of the millions of people that bought a Peloton.
Yeah, in that group. Yeah.
I'm an enormous college football fan, and I think we're about 40, from where we're recording this, we're probably about 24 to 48 hours for losing the season, I think, this year.
I saw that the Big Ten voted last night. That'll let people know.
I am a Virginia Tech alum, and we have a little condo at Virginia Tech now. I'm a big part of all that, but I enjoy all of sort of sports, working out. We live 200 yards from the ocean, so I can go sit in a beach chair and recharge looking at that. And we just bought a really cool new fire pit, and I can do more thinking around that fire pit than average, I would say.
I understand that. Yeah. As I'm recording this, we're at a lake house, and we've been sitting around the fire pit every night. And my absolute favorite thing is staring at the ocean. So that's what I do to recharge. The last part of the show, the rapid fire questions, the questions are rapid. Your answers do not have to be. So what were you like in high school? And do you remember the first time you got in memorable trouble?
So in high school, looking back on it, I was probably nerdy, but at the time I thought I was this really cool jock. I was the football player and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting how your perspectives change. Had a lot of fun in high school, academics and sports and friends. I do remember a couple times being in trouble. And I think one of them I thought we'd sort of gotten past till I was at a basketball practice. And in the middle of practice, I saw my mom walk in and pull the coach to the side, and the coach pointed his finger, came to me, and I wasn't at practice the rest of the day. I'll just leave it.
Awesome. Most of us, you talked about, being on the banking side before. Most of us stumbled into a career in credit unions in one way or the other. Back in high school, going to college, what did you want to be when you grew up? Even before that, I always wanted to be a pilot in the Air Force. My grandfather was a pilot, World War II, Korean War, thought about officers candidacy school, all this kind of stuff. But I've had ear infections and you'd get tubes in my ears as a kid. And it didn't work being in the air that much. So got the business job, sort of followed my dad's footsteps and landed in banking and credit unions and wouldn't trade it. Love it. Absolutely. That's fantastic. Wait, so did you ever get a pilot's license or like on your own or anything like that? Or no? Can't do it.
No, but I got to be honest with you. I mean, I actually miss all of one of the things about the pandemic, I think we all miss our friends that we see at conferences and stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
Oh, it's terrible.
And having a business that is, Chartway is in Virginia, Houston, and Utah. I'm used to flying a lot. I have not been on an airplane since the last week of February, and I've I really, really want to. I actually, the airport, you've grown to a point like you hate airports. I want to go to the airport.
Jill and I are both about the same time as you as far as that airport. And we've talked about like how much we even miss like sitting in a sky club. You're just by yourself. You have all kinds of time to think. It's like, yeah.
I am ready for that.
I am so ready to be on a plane myself. So any daily routines that you have that if you just don't do, your day just feels off?
You got to work out. I mean, and I think that's honestly more for mental than physical, especially now. So whether I'm on the Peloton or a short run, or even if I don't even want to be that active, just go for a walk down near the beach. That, and I do the emails early in the morning. It helps me kind of get the day set. There's certain blogs I like to see and check on kind of what's going on.
Is that all stuff you do first thing, or you get the workout in early? Or
I typically try to work out in the morning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Didn't get it done today, so I'll go later today. But typically I do. And when you stop sweating and stuff, that's kind of when I read my emails and read a few places, Wall Street Journal and things like that are going on. Gets me set.
Absolutely. The random question: what's the best album of all time? That one you can listen to from front to back without skipping a song.
Yes, I don't know if I can necessarily say an album. I do have very diverse interests. So whether I'm listening to Darius Rucker and Hootie and the Blowfish or Florida Georgia Line, or my family will actually die when they hear me say this. They don't like me to publicize it. I like yacht rock radio. Darius radio. So I could just as easily listen to Brandy as I could, anything that's country or Hootie or anything going on right now.
Yeah, our managing editor at CUInsight is going to love your answer. Back when we used to have an office, he would sometimes control the Pandora station, and Hootie and the Blowfish radio on Pandora and Yacht Rock were two of his go-tos. So
the phrase on Yacht Rock radio? If your perfect day just got perfecter, you're on Yacht Rock radio.
You and John are going to have to compare notes. So, as you know, I know Jill's assigned some books to you and your team. We have books all over the house that have been recommended. A lot of them have been recommended to us. Is there a book that either you've gifted others or that book that you just think everybody should read?
I mean, I'm not just trying to play up on what Jill just did. And Jill and I have joked about it a lot because it was big letters, short words, but safe to soar, following all of the DEI conversations and such. And I reached out to Jill early on, right after George Floyd's death. And she and I had actually already had conversations for a year about her working with our leadership and board. And then obviously all of this happened. But I did read the book. And I can remember sitting on the beach reading the book saying, okay, well, when am I going to get to the part that makes me feel really uncomfortable? But this book really sort of set the tone in terms of relationships and including people's ideas. I think it was far more probably inclusion than it was diversity.
Yeah.
And some of it may have read elementary-ish, but I thought it was so important. I loved it, honestly.
That's fantastic. As you've gotten older, what's become more important to you? And my favorite part of this question, what's become less important?
More important, just enjoying the way. I mean, I guess the less, it's always, you kind of have these personal goals. You want to be able to do this. You want to do this. You want to do this. You want to do this. And I don't know if it's the realization that just if you enjoy the ride, it'll all work out anyway.
Yeah. And
I don't mean that in an apathetic manner at all. Yeah. You got to have a purpose, but I think you can enjoy the ride along the purpose a bit more. And if there's one thing that I've had to learn more this year than ever before is to sort of know what you can control, know what you can't, kind of try to deal with the in between a little bit. And it's not that you raise your hands and give up, but you just try to respond accordingly. I was telling somebody the other day, we were having a conversation. There's a main road near where I live called Atlantic Avenue. I said, it's gotten to the point where somebody could tell me that a Martian was walking down Atlantic Avenue, and I don't think it would faze me.
Not at this point.
I mean, it's just, you learn to accept a little bit more, I think.
I keep saying that everything has to be written in pencil during this time. So maybe that'll be a good thing to carry on going forward. There's a question that I didn't send you. When you hear the word success, who is the first person that comes to mind?
The word success, the first person that comes to mind. I will actually say my father, my dad.
How come?
In fact, because he did something different. He was an executive in Richmond, Virginia, bought a second home in Emerald Isle, North Carolina. And I'll never forget the day when he called me up, said, I've sold the house. And he was probably my age or a year or two younger, and just quit his job, retired very early. No one ever saw it coming. Went down to Emerald Isle, got bored, ran for mayor.
Did you really?
Mayor of the town for 12 years. Was actually asked to be, would he want to run for Congress and do stuff? And I think that the reason I say the success is he's gotten to call his shots the whole way.
Yeah.
And they're random shots. So there's not a linear path to him. And I think it's just maybe being successful enough to be able to kind of call it as you see it, and not conform to some other ways.
I love the second career in retirement is just becoming mayor. So that's fantastic. Brian, thanks again for being on the show and sharing your story. The last question I have for you is, do you have any final thoughts or any asks of our listeners?
I think just be well, be kind. I'll ask you to do the same thing I've sort of asked our team, and we talk amongst our board. This is a weird time for everyone. I'd say in our lives, I doubt there's been anything that we've dealt with like this. So we certainly have a health aspect to it. But I think mentally as well, we got to make sure we take care of each other. So just be well and be kind.
That is the perfect way to wrap this all up. We will link to everything we talked about in the show notes. Is there a best way if people have additional questions for you? LinkedIn, Twitter machine, email, what's your poison as far as contact?
Email btschools@chartway.com. And I am on LinkedIn and Twitter. Hit me up anytime.
Awesome. Thank you again, Brian. Stay healthy, friend, and I hope you have an amazing day.
All right, you too. Be well, be kind.
Before we go, I wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for listening. We wouldn't get to have this much fun and do what we do if it weren't for you listening. Also, a big thank you to Brian for taking the time out of his busy schedule to share his experiences with all of us. And then a huge thank you to our sponsor, PSCU. Our friends at PSCU have been longtime partners and supporters of ours at CUInsight.com. So please make sure to click on their link in the show notes, give them some love, see everything they have going on to help the credit union community. Also, we are on all the podcast players out there. Apple, Spotify, Pandora, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, you name it, we're there. We would greatly appreciate if you would subscribe, maybe even leave us a 5-star rating. You could even take another step and leave a review on the old Apple podcast machine. It really does help with us spreading credit union love and the visibility of the show. And if you don't think we're worth the 5 stars, just forget that I even asked, and you can reach out to me directly and let me know where you think we can improve. And also, don't forget about the CUInsight Experience podcast book list. Need something to stimulate the old mind while we're all going through this interesting time? We've got you covered. Get your next book recommendation from the guests on our show. Thank you all again for listening. I hope you have an amazing day, and please stay healthy out there, friends.